still out to lunch.
An interesting colour kit.
Right.
Taking the hurricane kit on out. Yeah. Tātai ki tai. Te ata kura.
We welcome Angus, and we have Hannah and Janine as well. Come on up to the front, Roxy.
Thank you.
Coming to talk to us today about the unique science engagement.
Yes, so it's just Hannah and I today.
Okay.
Janine's not well.
Oh, yeah.
So, anyway. Right, so appreciate the slides up there. So we go to the next slide. Why am I driving this?
Well, do that, but go next slide and then work.
No, I can drive it. That's all good, thank you. So look, purpose of this briefing is just to recap on the project, remind everybody where we're at. Talk about the recent community meetings we had, what happened to those, what the outcomes were. Talk about, you know, the process, the decisions we have to make, and the next steps. So, just to recap, oops. First time.
Face towards here, over here. You can look at it over here and then it does it behind you. And if it doesn't work, then just say, yeah, next slide. Just tell
There we go.
next.
So look, just recap the site, we're all familiar with it, nearly 3,000 square metres across the road here, it's in two parcels, as you can see on the plan there. I won't dwell on that too much. So we want to talk about recapping the process. So the board signed off on this process back in when was it? Earlier this year in April. I'll send around some copies of it just to remind us. So that's where we're at.
One kit. Any people in the
Here not shown on the timeline here, the points that ain't here. So if we recall, the main milestone that recently passed was we did some phase one consultation, and then we brought back a report to the board in April. No, sorry, that was yes, yeah, in April. And that was the result of the phase one consultation process. And we shortlisted some options, and at that stage, the board we had some deputations that talked about a community hub option. And the board said, can we put an extra step of consultation on that to flesh out what that meant and see what the community thought. So we did that. We came over on the 3rd of June, we met with a couple of key stakeholder groups, and then on the Thursday we came back at the Garden Hall. We had some consultation sessions. Then I'll go to the next slide. You had was discussed at those.
Oh, so this one we thought it would be important to recap that phase one engagement. So as an introduction, actually, I've met a lot of you. My name's Hannah. I'm in the engagement team. You on this project, there was previous Peninsula, and she's no longer at council, but I've taken on her role in this project. So this is a recap of what we heard during the phase one that she ran. You've heard this before, but so the community identified a wide range of potential future land uses. as we explained at the 7 April Community Law meeting, these were assessed via an approach validated by Council's monitoring and research staff against the site development principles. These were updated with reference to Council's current community outcomes and strategic priorities as weighted with the principle reflects community feedback for future use weighted highest. The resulting scores were ranked. We heard 97 responses and most feedback referred to multiple uses, with the most important being keeping the butcher on the site, the mention of community, so that was grouped up, but it was a variety of different pieces of feedback, including space for community groups, historic information, public space, specific community facilities, creative art space, and climate change or similar defence space. Also, residential use and other retail and commercial uses ranked relatively highly in that early phase of engagement. Staff then considered this information in conjunction with other local knowledge and views, evidence-based technical information and expert advice within and outside of council, and anecdotal corroboration. And for the reasons explained to you on this in the 7th of April report, this saw many of the potential land uses discounted, resulting in a short list of mixed use comprising commercial and or residential activity, and a small in-ground stormwater treatment device identified for possible location within the site. But then we met with the community again at some specific meetings, but also those 2 community workshops that we ran. And I'll talk you through how those community meetings worked and then what we heard. So we presented to both, we ran the community workshops in 2 phases. At the start of those workshops, staff presented a bit of a background to date, just to make sure that everyone was on the same page, up to speed with the process, and singing from the same song, I suppose. And then we broke the group into 5 different table discussions, and these were based on the most common themes heard throughout the first phase of engagement and what we heard through the deputations to you in April. So these were community activity that was trying to capture the community hub idea that was discussed. Climate change adaptation, residential activity, commercial activity, and the physical development of the site. And we brought along quite a lot of council staff to those workshops, just to make sure that we had the right subject matter experts for each of the tables. Next slide.
Oops.
Great. So 30-ish attended these workshops, and they did result in some evolution of what we heard during the phase 1 of engagement, and some clear messages from those in attendance, and even some almost consensus, which is pretty good from engagement normally. So it became evident that the community hub concept was an active, primarily outdoor community space that could provide for several interests, e.g. a town square with places to sit, integration with the common or museum, and a form of visitor attraction like a historic time walk, market stalls, or some sort of prefab community spaces. The strongest interest in the workshops in general was the climate change adaptation table. So that wasn't one of the ones that we listed as a key theme during that phase 1, but after the deputations we thought it's probably a good idea to bring along the staff from climate adaptation. So glad we did, because they were able to be there and answer some questions and provide some sort of background information. So within their table, a common theme, and other tables, a common theme was to keep the site in council ownership with some flexibility for future use to evolve with Aotearoa's changing needs. There was acknowledged need for more residential provision in Rākaihautū, particularly family homes and seasonal worker accommodation. However, opinions were quite divided on whether this site was an appropriate or optimal space for that need. There was general sentiment that there is currently adequate provision of commercial and retail property in Rākaihautū. However, additional visitor attractions that add to the night stay would be advantageous. There was overwhelming support to retain the butcher shop in the current building. The feedback on the physical development of the site favoured flexibility of the site's land use to evolve with the community's changing needs over time. People want the site well maintained, the rear visible and open from the street, and the butcher shop building's historic presence / street appeal and amenity value to be maintained. Other considerations that we heard quite strongly was a desire for car parking, particularly the back or this side of the site. A desire to work with Onuku on a future use outcome if residential was, if we went with residential, and a general acceptance of a possible location for a small in-ground stormwater treatment device once that is discussed. Yeah.
We can move it on.
Next slide.
Next slide, yeah, sorry. So look, where are we at? We've, as Hannah's just articulated, we've got quite a bit of feedback from the community now through 2 different sessions, 2 different phases, and I'll come back to the process at the end. This slide doesn't deliver what everyone wants. So in terms of our decision making, there are other factors we need to consider as council, not just what the community desires, but we've got to look at our existing levels of service, their capacity and utilisation, and what our current strategic plans are, what's in our LTP. And there are other ways that some of the community outcomes can be delivered. We've always talked through this process when we'll report back, not for this August report we're about to talk about, but the next time we talk about delivery mechanisms and options. So where have we ended up? Next slide. So in April, taking into account that matrix of issues I've just talked about, LTP provisions, budgets, levels of service, and that, in April we brought back a report following the first phase of consultation that shortlisted some activities that were commercial, residential, and the small and ground storm treatment device. Resulting from the latest consultation, though, where we went and asked about what the community thought a community hub was, I think we've got an emerging theme where a lot of people always seem to be, as Hannah said, a common theme that retention of the butcher shop's important. So it seems that when we first went out, commercial activities were important, commercial retail, but in this latest consultation, a lot of the feedback was that ACRA is sufficiently provisioned in terms of commercial and retail. Future needs are quite unknown, but the butcher shop is really important. And also the importance of that in terms of its amenity value and street frontage and heritage look and feel. So I think when we're talking about commercial retail, that's the primary aspect that the community would like to retain. There was a lot of discussion around opening up the frontage of the street to make the site more visible at the back. And then also some temporary community activation, like the middle third of the site, with the back third of the site, there's some mixed opinion about whether there was a community need for car parking, or maybe that would lend itself towards residential development or worker accommodation. So that's sort of the emerging theme we picked up on. We've started drafting the August report, which is coming up, and we've sort of coined that option as managed retention for future needs. And that would also provide for, I think I quite liked some of the community talked about keeping the site so it could evolve with the changing needs of Rākaihautū. So we could think about that as for climate hazard adaptation, or we could think about that if the community grows and needs more residential and more commercial with that, then there's some flexibility to do that. So what does that managed retention look like in the interim period? So let's talk about the process. The board signed off on this process. We're at this stage here. We're having a briefing. We're going to bring back a report in August, which we've started drafting. Part of today's discussion is we'd like some feedback on your thoughts on where we sit at the moment, which will help guide that report in part, and to where we go next. The process shows a phase 2 of consultation coming up, and then us reporting back after that. So the way we're looking at drafting the report at the moment is option 1 would be we continue with the current process. And then option 2 could be in August when you get this report, you might go to cement that process and look at doing it slightly differently. I'll come back to that in a minute. So just following the current process, a report to the board on the 25th of August. Then we'd undertake the balance of phase 2 consultation. So the Gaiety workshop we've just built into the start of phase 2. So it's not phase 1, 2, 3, it's phase 2A and 2B, so to speak. And then we bring back the briefing from that consultation area in the new year with a report to the board in early 26 on future land use options and delivery mechanisms. But what I'd like to talk about today is whether we feel that we might suffer from consultation burnout, and if we go back for another phase 2B, so to speak, of consultation, whether we would achieve anything different. And whether in the 25 August report, the board feels they're of a view where they have a good feeling for the future use of the site. And I think we're trying to, as I've said in previous meetings, we're trying to narrow this down. We don't want to go back out with a salt and put it out every time we go and talk to the community. So we're feeling clear that there's need to entertain a butcher shop, and that's the commercial aspect and use of the site. Potential residential is still a viable option, and there's evidence, anecdotal evidence from the community that there's a need for residential. And that's in 2 categories, I suppose. One is worker accommodation, and one is family homes. Whether the site lends itself well to the latter or not, I'd have some doubts, but certainly feels worker accommodation. And retaining the site for some support with flexibility to evolve with the changing needs of Rākaihautū, and some community activation through the middle. And there was talk around that of, if we open up the site, we're moving the annex to the butcher shop, and then maybe some prefab or smaller buildings in that community activation area that cater for those community uses, like the old shop and the toy shop at we had us playing slip back there, the toy library, in that community area. And we would come back with delivery options and mechanisms for that. So I think we're at a point for the August report where we could go in a couple of directions. One is we stick with process and we narrow it down to here's the site options, let's go back out to the community and have some more discussions about scope and scale and size and how they would like to see that worked on the site. Or we feel that we have sufficient information here to go, well, look, let's see if we can land on what we want that site to look like and bring it back and have a limited consultation. And Heather and I were talking about whether that's some sort of survey type process rather than, because phase 2 at the moment is a repeat of phase 1. We'll go back out, we'll talk to the stakeholders and businesses and groups, and then we'll have some workshops and drop-in sessions and all that. Or whether we just, we could design the August report, we could bring back a more streamlined consultation process, maybe a survey around here's where we think we're going in terms of uses, some of what I've articulated, maybe a couple of options for the back third, parking or residential. How do you feel about that and doing a survey?
So then what you're saying is going to be the report that comes in August. It will be those types of choices.
Yeah, we would like some guidance from the board today. If you felt was the report would be more focused towards one or the other, like if it's we feel we've got a good feel for how we'd like the site to look, bring back a process to help us arrive at that bit more quicker and go back out with full consultation, and we can think about how that consultation might look and what options we bring back in that report for that.
I feel like we might have some questions around that process to clarify. So we'll go with these guys. What's your question?
Can I start with some, just go back a step first? Peter, well done, good work. First question is sea level rise. What's the council's position on this? Because if this is going to be a concern in 50 years' time or 60 years' time with the sea level, because we're looking at the Tonkin and Taylor report that says in 100 years' time the water level is going to be up, lapping on the steps of the Banks of Meat site. What is the council's position on that? Because they're only raising the wharf 335 centimetres. So where does this all sit? Is there a policy around this, or is this Tonkin and Taylor thing sort of the feeling in the council is that it might be just somewhat overstated? I'd like to get an opinion on all things.
I can't speak to the council's position on that, but my understanding is that the coastal hazards adaptation team will be coming out to all the community boards to talk about the process going forward around sea level rise. So I can't talk to the validity of the Tonkin and Taylor report, but I did ask Sarah Palin from our coastal hazards adaptation team, because you put forward that question, Nigel. So her response is between 2080 and 2100, they expect sea level rise between 28 centimetres and 1 metre. That's a large range due to the uncertainties around how greenhouse gases may contribute to that.
Sure, I understand that. What
happens with ice sheets and ocean responses. Over the past 30 years, 1990 to 2020, we've seen 15 centimetres of sea level rise.
15?
Yeah.
Sorry, what was 15 centimetres of sea level rise in what period?
In the last 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
That's the advice I'm getting.
So we've grown up walking.
So, I think that my understanding is that there will be an engagement process with community boards about which areas the Christchurch City Council concentrates on next, to similar to the Wellington Harbour Basin study we've just done, they're now deciding which other areas they're going to concentrate on. I think they'll be asking community boards, as I understand it, to prioritise which areas are done next.
Thank you. Would there be a consideration of, sorry, Manager, I've sort of got a wee bit here.
You've got it wrong, yeah.
Sorry. Maybe keeping the site as in council owned and then have a leasehold for any sort of property, maybe partial property development? Would that be something that would be considered?
It's always an option. It's
With that, and segue to that, the life of a building now, I think, you know, if you built a property now, it's got to last 50 years. So if you built some limited residential on, say, a third, hypothetically, would that then possibly have a business plan and sort of run down in 50 years or something? Would it, you know, I guess what I'm saying is that if you don't build anything there, if you build something there, it can always be taken down if there's a problem, you know, in 50 years' time. I don't know.
Yeah, when we come back with the final report, we talk about delivery mechanisms, but leasehold is always an option. It's not a perfect option for residential development. I think ownership is always better. Leasehold comes with issues, comes with market perception and sales issues, comes with some lending issues as well. It might look good at the beginning of the lease period, looks less attractive closer to the end of the lease period, but it is still an option if you wanted to retain flexibility over that back third of that site. But then 50 years is also a very theoretical lifespan of a residential property. Sure, with site. Just look around you. There's a lot of buildings here that are over 50 years old. So sometimes theory and practice don't always match.
I just have one other, probably more, but one to start with. Just on the condition of the BP Meats building and the fixability of it, have you done any numbers around that or considerations? Because it seems to me a reclad and a re-roof and rewire seem to be the major factors, and to be able to do that in such a way without disrupting the business would be a real priority.
Yeah,
if possible.
And
then who pays for it?
Well, that's something if we've got an ownership strategy or plan, which is what we're seeking, and that was to retain the butcher shop. That is the next exercise we would do. What I can say is on Friday I signed off on some minimal work to occur on a BP meat site to ensure, the butcher's building, to ensure that it's watertight, so replacing spouting and gutters, seeing some roof leaks, trimming back some of the vegetation. So in the next few weeks, you'll see some urgent remedial repairs happening there.
Thank you. That'll do for me right now.
That's another great question, Tyrone.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, just on the BP Meats, the butcher's building itself. So, I mean, just noting, obviously there has been a lot of feedback to say, please retain the butcher. Now, I mean, there's only so much we can do, right? Like, I mean, if we can retain the building, whether or not there's a butcher in there, we've only got limited levers. I mean, we can't force someone to have a butchery business. So, but I'm kind of wondering, like, are there things that we can do to pin down that site as a, like, you know, it can only be a butcher's?
Have a certain vibe about it.
Yeah, and things that we can do to incentivise a butcher's to be there, like, you know, in terms of rent agreements and that sort of stuff. Are they things that we can't? Are they levers that we've got?
Yes, yeah, certainly. If our strategy at the end of this is that's one of the outcomes we want to achieve, that's a signed off deliverable for the site, that's a future use, long term, then we would cost and scope the work to bring that building another lease of life, another 50 years maybe. And we would be having discussions with the current tenant around what that means in terms of lease term and that. But as council owns the site, we can also control the future use if that butcher decided not to operate from there into the future. So I don't know, hypothetically say they said, look, we'll sign up to another 10-year lease. And in 10 years they decided to go, then we as the owner can control the future use of that building.
Right, cool, thank you. Just follow-ups on that. So, when people say they love the butcher and they want to retain the butcher, what's the kind of the general, what is it that they're trying to retain? Is it the convenience of having a butcher in Akaroa, or is it the vibe of the building? Is it that it's always been, like, what are the kind of those key sort of things that sort of make that such a cherished piece of the, and I know that you could tell me offline about this, but I'm just asking staff what theirs.
Yeah, funny enough, at the guarantee workshop, I was on the commercial table, so this was where that was discussed quite a bit. I think it's a bit of everything. Certainly 100% it's the feel that building provides the main street, the sort of heritage and amenity value of it, the look and feel of it. It's not a listed heritage building, but I think a lot of people feel that it provides
Streetscape.
Yeah, streetscape heritage value that to the street. So there's definitely that about the building, particularly the main building, which is not so much the annex. I think a lot of the people saw the annex as a bit of an impediment to the visibility into the back of the site.
And by the annex, you mean the ugly bit of building that's tacked onto the side that could be demolished?
Yeah. And then it seems like the butcher shop provides a level of service to the community that the community likes as well. And look, I read the article in the paper a month or so about it, that there's a lot of people that want to be able to go to the butchers and buy a couple of sausages. They don't want to have to go to the supermarket and buy a pack of a dozen and that sort of thing. So I think it provides a service in that regard that's unique to Akaroa, and it's unique to the demographics of Akaroa as well. So I think it's fun. But if it wasn't the butcher shop, I think people would still feel the same about the building.
Is it also loyalty to the people with the current leases?
There has been, and since I've been involved in the project, quite a lot of discussion about being impressed with the current leases have done with the place and the services they provide.
So like people not wanting to offend those people and want to be on their side.
It didn't seem about offence, it was more about liking the services they provided.
Yeah,
That's my take on it.
Yeah, I think so. I get a lot of feedback at the table I was at that they've done an amazing job, and the shop looks really nice inside and well displayed.
Yeah, just this is more of a generic comment than it was what I've taken from listening myself from the groups that I've been involved with these discussions that come up around that area, or just in general about the accommodation issue in Akaroa. It's about, I guess, putting it in the conditions of the building when it's built. Like I bring to mind all the builds around now that are in the town that have been built specifically for Airbnbs. Now I believe in the titles and they've got a title saying that they can't be lived in. A big chunk of those, and there's a real problem with people here that want to retire on a flat. Vis-a-vis myself, that need a building that they don't have stairs in, or their wife might get killed, or myself might get killed. And there is an opportunity, I think, and a part of that, and hearing that a third of the respondents basically are keen for some sort of seasonality, and maybe some older people accommodation. It's not really there for family accommodation and things like that. I think it would be titled that they can have a minimum rental period of a month or 6 weeks, or permanent residency, and no Airbnb, and then have some that were just smaller units for the service visitors, you know, that would come over here for seasonality. There may be a good way of doing a blend that brings those two needs together without increasing the Airbnb market and a huge development. I'll just, that's just.
It's something that it would be good to know, I guess, in the report. What is the feasibility of residential? Is it, even if it's spot, what would it? Yes, it is residential.
It's just, it has come up about.
No, we're not,
tightening
it's residential.
of it, yeah.
Yeah, certainly, on some of your comments there, that there was strong feedback that visitor accommodation was not what was needed.
Correct.
So no Airbnb, so to speak.
Yeah.
But more for workers. And I don't know so much about seasonal workers, but just worker accommodation and people that are committed to living here and working in Rākaihautū.
It's a very seasonal community, so but it does that spikes and ebbs.
Yeah.
I'll back it now.
Look, I just wanted to clarify to make sure I understood, and it might be that I'm just a bit dense. So what you're suggesting is your second option in terms of the consultation or the process. What you're suggesting is that the briefing we're having today is really would be the briefing down here, and that the report, this final report, would be the August 25 report. So you're proposing to not do any of that other engagement in phase 2.
Well,
Is that what you're suggesting?
not quite. I think what I'm rather asking than suggesting that whether they want to do that full-blown phase 2 consultation. If I was to make a suggestion, I would say we should do something, but Hannah and I could come back in the August report with something that's a bit more streamlined and doesn't go back out and then seek engagement at that full-blown level that it is now. Because I think we feel like we've arrived at a point where we have a good feel for what the future use of the site should be, aligned with the community's views, aligned with our strategies and plans, the development principles and spaces and places plan. And we're just a little bit fearful that if we do a consultation, we'll end up suffering from burnout, and we might just land up back where we are now with the same set of information.
We just want to use the right tactics to make sure that you will understand the community use, really. So we can provide some advice at the next meeting on the approach, the tactics, and how we suggest that we could get that for you. But the reason that you're being clicked on it to that level is that you had approved this, and what Angus has been talking about is a bit of a departure from it. It's not saying that it wouldn't exist, it's just saying it would exist at at least a degree.
I suppose the extremes are we continue with that, go back out with some more comments. So we'll bring a report in August that goes, here's how the site could work, which is what I've articulated. You could go back out with full-blown consultation and follow that up with another report. Or the other extreme end is let's do nothing. But I think the compromise would be something, someone just bring you back another report that goes, here's how you could deliver, here's what we think the site should be, and here's how you can deliver it. But I'm suggesting it should probably be something, so a little bit of consultation, a little bit bespoke, a little bit more streamlined, not broadening it out, but sort of narrowing it down.
Look, I'm in favour of keeping it, as long as it captures the right information. You haven't mentioned at all about the school and the Runa. I know. I was there when the first one of the Gaiety and came in with Rick actually.
Yes.
And you approached him and asked him. Now, and he expressed the interest in being involved, but didn't want to upset the community and wanted to actually wait for the community to come up with what they want, and then they would get involved or follow up with that. Is that what your take on that was?
Yeah, sort of my take on that was, I was fairly clear about it, and we've had other discussions with Anuku as we've gone through this as well. Anuku strongly believe there's a need for residential roof accommodation. And they would say that for the whole site, excluding the butcher shop, of course, because like everyone else, they like to have the butcher shop. And what they've said is they would like to be a partner in delivering that, and they stand ready to do that at any stage. But what they'd like to do is see where the community and community board land on. And if the community and community board land on, that's what we want, then they're standing there ready and waiting to have a conversation about delivering that.
And in a way, I feel like that comment may just help us decide about process here. We need to hear back from the community clearly on the options. Yeah, I don't know, what do you guys think?
So does that mean you'll go away and come back with another one of these?
Well, we're definitely coming back with a report in August, which is going to be setting out what we've just briefly talked about today,
Yeah.
And then seeking a resolution on what happens next.
Yeah.
Probably what we'd like to do is narrow down to what we'll try and get a resolution on what we want the future of the site to look like.
Yeah.
That probably at this stage, our recommendation would be some sort of managed retention, with some strategies around what that means. And probably some bespoke and streamlined consultation to make sure A, we have the community on board, and B, just get some feedback maybe on the back third of the site if that's what you feel, around car parking or residential.
So a clear understanding of what the options are from leading from here, so clear understanding and any potential hurdles, I guess. So that might be around, you know, hurdles with commercial, hurdles with residential, hurdles with the community space. Understanding those could be moving forward. And then, yeah, clear consultation in regards to those choices. Because I think up until now, even though you've got a good idea, these are just have been ideas, bringing them all together. Now there will be actual choices, is that right? It's options, right? So that kind of gives it a different weight, and I want to make sure everybody's involved in wherever it's appropriate. I don't know, I feel like I can speak for everybody, but that's kind of my take on it.
I have more questions,
Oh, sorry.
if that's all right, if that's all right.
Yes, fire.
And is there, just in terms of the accommodation situation, is there a role in this for the Ōtautahi Community Housing Trust? Potentially?
Probably not.
Probably not.
No.
It's not their,
No.
it's not their bag.
The issue, because I'm in Bruce Randall's team, he's actively involved and has housing under his auspices.
Yep.
We've been talking about that. If he was sitting here, he'd probably tell you that land is not an issue for housing for a start. Funding is, that's the biggest thing.
Or Rākaihautū.
No, in general.
Right.
In general, comes back up
Yeah.
with it. So that's just a general principle for housing, and that's not just council and central government funding as well. So the biggest hurdle for housing development is funding for the building, not the land component. And then Pātaka, the Ōtautahi Housing Trust operate off a model where they look at MSD data, and MSD doesn't have data specific Pātaka. So they, and because they don't have the data, they don't have an identified probable need. In terms of the current housing they have here, it has very low turnover. And if any of them become vacant, they don't stay vacant long, but they do not have a waiting list.
Yep.
So in terms of MSD data, in terms of their own experience, They don't see that there's a perceived need or a large demand, and then they don't have funding. So that's why I'm saying no.
Okay.
Sharon, is that your question? So we go to Kathy and.
You go, sorry, I'll hit some others.
So the third option with the community activation and the evolving what community expectations are, how did you land on that, or how did you take that step further? In terms of, like, you've talked to the community, they want this community space and stuff, so how would you, kind of engage that process a bit more?
Yeah, we would, like I said, we'd bring back delivery mechanisms and options. The council does not have any budgeted or thing to do that itself. But then one option is always that, the board asks for money to be put in the LTP to activate that site. We would have to have some design plan around that. Or another option we would clearly bring back is you go out to the community with an expression of interest or an RFP to see if there's community groups that would like to sort of lease that site or put it under a management contract and deliver it themselves. And then they can tap into community funding or RATA funding or something to do that. So that's two options off the top of my head, but they were logical ones that we would probably put forward initially.
Are you going with your question, Sharon?
Oh, yeah. Just in terms of first a statement, I guess, like just in terms of the future engagement, like I sort of, understand the sort of the burnout thing. I'm looking at you, Nigel, here, but like, just for
I was not kicking you.
just for feedback with your eyes. But obviously, like whatever we do, there's going to be the need to have it doesn't need to be like a full-on formal engagement necessarily, but certainly there's no way that we can just keep moving on without having a mechanism for engagement, like just that continuous community feedback. That's my general feeling on it. But anyway, what was I going to say? Oh yeah, so you said, and quite rightly, I guess it, can't deliver everything, can't be all things to all people, the site, right? So, but in terms of what we can do, we can have a community space and some workers' accommodation and some art space, or we can have what's the capacity there, like for the, let's just say it could be 10 different things. How many of those things can we do with it? Can we have a big slide? No, it's
it can be 5, please. 5 out of 10.
water park.
So what I think it can be, but what I think it can be is, the butcher shop with the new lease alive, the front which opened up, so you can see it back there to the side.
Yeah.
Right into the back of the site. I think the middle third, it'd be really cool if the community group would step up and activate that in some way, whether that's a 20 or 50-year plan, but some way that the site gets sort of well maintained, well used.
Is it an Albion Square type of arrangement? Is that what you're kind of meaning?
Be something like that, yeah.
Albion Square being in Littleton for those.
Yeah,
who
that's all paid.
aren't aware of that.
I think probably is that.
But that's your community space.
Yeah, that has been mentioned, and maybe some little prefab type buildings for artists and residents, or like I said, the commercial activities that are, or community activities that are in the annex. And then, like we said, the car parking or residential on the back there, and then the store with a facility. I think that's about as much as the site can cater for.
But all with the ability to evolve.
You probably could, keep space for the likes of the, down here, there's obviously a clear message to try and move that, the little cottage over here, the original French cottage down by the wharf, that was always destined to go on that site. There's a couple of spaces for future. There, the old immigration, not immigration.
We're talking about U cottage or the
No, not you cottage.
or the other one we talked about.
Yeah, the old little one here. It's part of the museum property. I think.
Customs.
Yeah, the
Customs.
customs. Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually managed by the museum.
It is, internally, it's seen as one of their assets. I mean, that's sort of, what did we say earlier? That's a problem from 2080 to 2100, I think. But coming back to the site and that we're talking about probably 2/3 of that being maintained with some flexibility for future use, to evolve with the changing needs of Rākaihautū. That can mean anything. It could mean you get a declining population, or it could mean you've got an increasing population and need more residential and commercial. Could mean you've got coastal hazard problems to relocate assets, but could mean a whole lot of things. But I think the key is to have a management strategy around it, so it's not the eyesore mess that it is at the moment. So we know exactly where we're heading. We do something with the butcher's shop instead of sweeping that asset and not putting money into it and putting money aside for it. And we know where we're heading and got a site that the community can use in the meantime.
I think you're well on course. That's my personal opinion. Listening to you, I think you've picked up on that pretty well. I'm very comfortable.
Yeah, having those clear boundaries as well is going to help with getting that report to us and identifying it, those hurdles or issues that we need to know to make it, put that out to the community as well. Is that what you need from us? Is it giving you enough of a steer or a direction?
Yeah, I think so. If you're comfortable with what we're saying about where we think future use should land, we can couch the report that heads in that direction. And if you're comfortable that we revisit this process and come back to you in that report with a process we think is more bespoke to where we're heading rather than this process here,
Yeah.
which we feel is a little bit of a repeat of what we've already done.
Yeah.
Yeah, so some type of engagement that will catch.
Yeah.
The view of the choices.
Yeah. To design that.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm not quite clear where this steer has landed in terms of residing, like in terms of accommodation for workers or anything, seasonal workers or anything like that.
He's going to come back with that. And there'll be more decisions obviously made around at that point.
That's still on the table.
But it's still on
We
the
just
table.
want to
right?
put
It
both
should be on-
things out and raise the community clearly.
It's even still.
I think out of all the things we've talked about, the one that probably needs the biggest decision is if we head down that track and we've got that third of the site that could have a couple of options, that is probably what we want to get some good community feedback on.
Right, good.
Yeah, I feel that's the one variable in terms of trying to land on an option that we're talking about.
Sounds good.
Great. Thank you. Nice to meet you, Hannah. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, everyone, and your team. Appreciate it.
See you again in just over a month.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Great. It's getting
Good to see you.
Very great.
Well, we did say that we wanted to keep moving forward, so.
What did you say?
We did say we want to keep moving forward.
That's right, that's right.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, mate.
All right, so Jane, hi, you're next on the docket. Okay, that's great. We'll give us a minute to sort out that.
That's the in a big.
Alex, you want to hear about half an hour work? Was enough?
Right.
Put right. Thanks for coming.
And Lucy's and BP Lucy.
Oh, good. Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. I did, that's all right.
It's better to speak more freely if you don't.
I'm just sitting there behind us. Oh, okay.
It's checked on. Like this.
Oh.
They would be.
Oh, James, come on up.
Yeah.
Take that. And we've got all eyes on you. Yeah, no, it's Ashton. Talking. Totally focused on this.
Yes, it's.
Sure.
We don't.
Right.
And the floor is yours.
Sorry, guys, sorry.
I think you all know that and Miss Paul
Oh.
No. And I'm Jane Benson, I'm project manager for this. I think I know most people in the room now. DB Takeout was hoping she could attend, but things didn't quite line up. So there's a couple of slides in here that I will speak to. I'm sure in no way near as good as she wished, but I'll try. So basically today is just to come and provide a bit of an update on where things are tracking with Akaroa Wharf. And there's a couple of questions and requests that we'd like to put to the community board as well relating to all of this. So if you could jump off, so click on work. Like if you go, it's 10 people. Just make sure it's turned off the side, Jane. Oh, was that me or was that you?
That's us.
Okay. So we'll try to keep this to about 3 minutes and maybe leave a bit of time at the end if there's any questions, but feel free to jump in at any time if you do have any questions relating to this. So we'll cover just the general background, what we're doing and why. We'll touch on some of the design features this time, something we haven't really done before. Provide an update on the privately owned buildings, the 2 buildings connected to the wharf. Where we're at the resource consent program. The laydown areas, so the contractor areas. And then last but certainly not least, the community engagement where we're at, those next steps are that. Oh, next slide, please. So just a bit of a recap. I won't go into all of this, but essentially the wharf is nearing 140 years old now. Consultation was run in 2021 and 2022 regarding the wharf, and it was agreed to rebuild in the same area. And then that was approved by council. So we've got the funding for that, the top up since then. The new wharf will have a similar width and length, fractionally wider than it currently is. 2 pontoons, both larger than the current pontoon configuration we've got right now. We've also worked with the Fishermen's Association and ECAN on that pontoon configuration to make sure it's best set up for the users. It's where we have diesel, not petrol. There'll be a crane. The deck height, as mentioned before with the BP meets, will be raised, so that will go up between 0.5 metre and 0.6 metre. The reason for the slight difference is that the wharf at the moment isn't one solid level. And the wharf will be a mixture of concrete and timber, so we'll touch on that in a bit more detail later on. And we are designing it to last for 100 plus years. Next slide, please.
0.5 metre.
Yeah.
Sorry, okay.
So there's 3 key design elements that we'll touch on, spend hours on this, but we wanted to point out sort of the 3 of the more special pieces. So we'll talk about the features relating to the whāriki and the tōrapa. You can jump onto the next slide, please. So at the beginning of the wharf, we're wanting to make sure we are incorporating hardwood into it as much as possible. There will be large areas of concrete, but we're wanting to take that opportunity where we can to use timber salvage from the main Akaroa Wharf, the current Akaroa Wharf, remill that and actually incorporate that into the new wharf. So in this first section here, as you walk along, we will have what we're calling the feature railing. So the intention is to have that using hardwood from Akaroa Wharf and have some really subtle uplighting, so you can see it at night time as well, but doing that in a way that is also respectful of the night sky movement that is happening at the moment. We're wanting to make sure that whatever we design won't cause a whole lot of light pollution, but still make it a safe space for people to walk along at night time.
So these are just indicative, it might change slightly, but we just wanted to give you a sense of what some of these spaces might look like. So the next slide, please. So we have two key areas where we're incorporating mana whenua design. And so one of those is the taurapa. So the taurapa is called the stern first of the waka. It represents exploration, passage, navigation, and the connection between the cosmos and activities on Earth. So it's essentially, it's providing a gateway, and will be a really beautiful feature piece that you'll be able to see from a lot of different parts of Rākaihautū. So we're wanting to make sure this isn't some big, boring, ugly, concrete thing. So we're wanting to continue to have this area be beautiful and attract people, but also bring in some more of Onuku's story into the new wharf as well to honour all of the different legacies that come into this. So this will likely be a combination of steel and timber, intricately carved, and be a really stunning piece at the beginning of the wharf. Next slide, please. And then the other really special piece will be the whāriki. So the whāriki is essentially a woven mat, or in this case, we're using it like an entrance mat. So it will cover that transition between the land and the sea. The pattern of this is the Pātaka, which is a flounder. So it's helping to continue to tell the mahinga kai story of food gathered from the ocean. And we're also wanting to do this pattern, the first few segments of the wharf, but using hardwood salvage from the wharf. It is, because it's hardwood, even though some of these pieces are well over 100 years old, when we get it rebuilt, it's still exceptionally strong and in really good condition. So we're hoping we will be able to salvage enough to use that for here and still have some to give back to the community on top of what we need for the wharf. This will be a really beautiful area and help to ensure that that entrance, you are seeing a lot of hardwood around here, which is also honouring the design of the previous wharf having hardwood decking. This design is also on the whāriki at the Onuku Marae, so it's really special to continue that story through. I'm sure Debbie would have done a much better job of that, but that's my terrible passion. Next slide, please. So this is the materials. So we are very aware that the community is after hardwood for the wharf, and we're trying to strike that right balance between affordable, maintainable, but something that will also last 100 years and perform to the key things that comes into this is the importance level. So on the slide, we're designing to an importance level 2 structure. And one of the requirements for that is that it must withstand a 1 in 500 year earthquake. So that drives pretty significant requirements. And we need to make sure that it really can stand that test of time. So also with that 100-year design life, you simply cannot get that from hardwood in the piles. We can't get the fixity into the basalt layer. So what we're doing is we're needing to have those concrete and steel piles. But you'll see in the design of the wharf, we've got the handrails, the kick rails, seating, the whāriki, and the feature will be entirely made of hardwood to help soften that.
I think if I'm wrong, the pile design look will also hopefully reflect what you sort of currently see with the existing structure, so that will be very similar.
So a lot of here at the moment where you've got the boats towing up, we've got fender piles. So these lines here, every 4 metres you'll have the timber fender piles, so that is an inflection of the current wharf, 4 metre piles basic. We've also incorporated hardwood. This is essentially looks like diagonal bracing to reflect what we've got at the current wharf at the moment, which is a lot of hardwood diagonal bracing.
Just checking, I think piles are the ones that boats go up against.
Yes.
No, they hold the boat, also put a pad on it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so you often have a big black rubber strap on it as well, so you'll see that on my so next slide, please. The privately owned buildings, so 2 privately owned buildings, Black Cat and the Blue Pearl Gallery, are attached to the wharf at the moment. And they are both structurally connected. So if the wharf was to be removed, those buildings would be significantly worse off,
Probably fall over.
quite possibly.
Mm.
And so we are needing to navigate that really carefully. The building owners, we've been having lots of talks with them, but they've been really helpful and positive. And our proposed approach for this is essentially to council will structurally separate the wall from the buildings. There's a row of shared piles, sort of directly under that point, there's a row of piles. Those piles will be gifted to those buildings need those piles, the new wharf won't. And also put in an additional row of piles close to the building, which will essentially provide that same lateral support that the wharf did.
Because you're going to be 1/2 metre higher, aren't you, in most cases? So you'll be separating, that'll create a walk down or steps, is
Yes,
that right?
yeah, so a bit of both depending on the accessibility requirements for the door.
Yep.
And the height of that door.
So
So,
the original old wharf had a bit of a kick out in it. Is that
yes,
some of the old piles that are still under there?
yes, so under the
Yeah,
black.
going back to 1885, I'm sorry. Weak piece there. They did have one building when they did it.
Yes, so essentially where the Blue Pearl Jewellery Shop is, that's
an add-on.
roughly where,
And that was a late add-on down at the beginning as well.
yes, yeah.
Yeah, my mate Rodney built that.
So we've basically put to the building owners our proposal, which is essentially is touched on to structurally separate the buildings, to provide pedestrian connections from the wall to those buildings, to run new services, and also because those buildings, some of the piles are quite thin, and we'll put it to them to sort of research what national building standard it is to, how strong it is. We are taking the approach of doing a low vibration piling method. So that in itself does cost more to do than just to smash a bunch of piles in. So it's essentially sort of all going out a hole in the ground. We're needing to do that to avoid doing damage to these buildings though. So it's quite a complex situation, but if we were to not take that low vibration piling approach and council caused damage to those buildings, we would be liable for fixing it. Yeah, so it's a tricky situation. We're very mindful that ratepayer funds is being spent on something that is benefiting private owners. So we're just trying to navigate that really clearly and really transparently. Yeah, and in a way that whatever angle we look at it, it is fair and justified for all parties, for the building owners, but also for the ratepayers. Conditional on our proposal to those building owners is also that they hold an active licence agreement with council for support, for access, and also that they hold all of the appropriate consents and permits with City Council and APM as well. The question was put to us, what is the cost to council for doing this work? So it is approximately 1.5 million. So it's not a small sum of money, and that's largely made up with the additional piles, the pedestrian access, and that revised piling method to minimise the damage to those buildings.
Just a quick question, if it's going in the same footprint and it's going to be a little bit wider, how are you going to separate that building?
So,
Making it skinnier at that point, are you? Or
yeah,
what?
we could jump onto the next slide and this starts
Oh,
to show. So essentially there does need to be a 2 metre setback
Right.
where those buildings are
Right.
in the new wharf. So that's for a number of reasons, including making sure there's access for those gangways, but also that
Aren't you running off the line of the abutment at the moment? Doesn't that line not change?
we're coming out slightly. So
Okay.
bird's eye view where that abutment is, we're coming back 2 metres to the north. So
Right.
this,
2 metres that way. So the old wall's gone completely,
yes.
even the plaque saying built in 1895.
The plaque will remain.
Thank you.
The plaque will absolutely remain. That is also one of the really important heritage aspects that we're wanting to ensure remains connected with.
Yeah.
So as you can see, also the doors, the Black Cat and Blue Pearl are all of different heights, hence why it's quite a complex arrangement for the pedestrian access into those doors. We did, for a brief couple of months, explore the option with the building owners for us to acquire those buildings and do a long-term lease back. Trying to see if we could figure out a way to make that work. There could have been some really great opportunities, but essentially it came down to money and long-term ownership rights. So unfortunately, we weren't able to get to a point where there was collective agreement. But we certainly tried to make that option work.
So what about their existing piles? They must be getting pretty catty too, because they weren't as good as the very original ones, and the worm loves it, doesn't it?
Yes, there's Toledo worm in the water and they are damaging those piles. So some of the piles to both the wall and those buildings are quite significantly nicked where it's gone
I
in.
know.
Hence why we've put to the building owners some concerns around those structures, and they've got a time frame to provide reports back to us to confirm
Oh, cool.
what rating those buildings have.
Thank you.
Yeah, so on to the next slide, please. Resource consent and program. So we're just in those final stages of preparing the resource consent. A few delays with that, just with the updated geotech conditions and working with the building owners. But we're hopeful to get that through either July or August. We're hopeful for a late 2020 hearing, but it may be that gets pushed to early 2026. And then all going well, it's roughly about a month and a half to 2 months after the hearing before we then get issued with the permit and we hit the stand down period, and then we can crack straight into it. So that's like March, April, with completion by mid-2027. So it's about a 12-month build.
So still looking for a March 26 start.
Yeah. Yeah.
All things going well.
All things going well. Yeah. We're expecting that inevitably there will be some delays with weather. If any dolphins come into the area, we do need to stop work if they get too close.
So you're still going to employ someone on the wharf watching out for dolphins? I live 100 metres away. I can probably see that out my window.
Obviously, we would love to. There's some really specific criteria that the marine mammal observers have to do, but in for the contractor, they are looking at how they can engage with local community, potentially provide some local training to bring people up to that standard so that they can, really.
We've got some good binoculars.
Okay, good to know. I'll pass your details on.
Thank you.
So publicly notified resource consent, it goes to both ECAM and City Council, but ECAM will be leading the process since it's more in their jurisdiction. And as far as that construction approach goes, you can spend a lot of money to minimise pain, noise, vibration, etc. to the community, but it also means less money to build the wharf. So we're trying to strike that right balance between disruption and money for the wharf, and we feel that the approach we've got gets that balance right. But we will be really interested to get feedback from people and where there's things that we can be doing better. I mean, that is part of the purpose of the resource consent. But we're also really keen to just engage directly with people in the community where they've got opinions or concerns. We're really happy to sit down and meet with people and have a chat, because often that can be a lot more effective to have those conversations rather than have it battled out in a hearing at a very high price. So wherever possible, that is a request to the team here, that if there are people who have any concerns around it, if you could help encourage them just to talk to us in the first instance. We certainly don't want to block them from going through the resource consent hearing process, but it can often just be a lot more effective person to person.
That's great.
And then the next slide, please. So talking about that disruption, this is one of the things we do expect that people won't be too happy about, but it's one of those, there is always going to be some pain for people in this. So this feels to us like one of the least worst way to approach it. I've had most of the material brought over by barge, but needing some space here to have the materials loaded up to weld the huge big 12-metre long piles together. So using this space, but using it in a way that children's cricket can continue. La Race, the French Festival, the school use of the park, all of that can continue. because we've got those entrance points out there in a
Oh,
smaller
okay.
space.
Because I was going to say, you know, what conversation, I know you've been talking to Bob Masefield, but
Yes.
I told him, he told me about this. I interested because look, I think there's no other alternative. I think we picked out the softest thing for the town. I think, but it's going to impact on obviously a lot of those users. And long as they know, I guess there's ways that they can still work around it. So these dark patches, Bob was saying something, we're going to dig that out, they did dig that grass up. And
There's a few areas where we would need to just scrape off that top surface,
Just
so
the
these
top
things that needed
surface.
to be perfectly level, but we would only do that where absolutely required.
oh, okay, so it's just to get it level, it's not to build it like a foundation.
Gosh, no,
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 okay, thank you.
yeah, in that area we're trying to keep that as small as possible all the time, so there might be times when they just don't need that area 3.4 at all. So we wouldn't use it, so we'll just keep it as small as possible, and then when the project starts to line up, I can shrink that area down. So just trying to keep our footprint as small and the least disruptive as possible.
Sorry, the Edinburgh Walk and Bummin, so what is going to take place in there? Because you've got the little wee Weybridge office there. So is that going to be out of action? Are you saying that grey area is just a workspace then, or?
Yeah, so that will essentially be fenced off, and
Well-
that will mostly be used for machinery, so we've got a big crawler crane, diggers,
Okay.
we'll have, equipment there, there'll be a
So-
small site office.
So what about the drop-offs for, I mean, there's a lot of buses coming over here, the smaller ones generally, not the big ones or two boats. There has been a lot, so they always use that as a drop-off and park area, well, more of a drop-off and then some obey the rules and go down the other end of town. Even that's going to be somewhat impeded. So what about, how are those people going to be through that season? Yes, it's going to be.
Cruise ship,
It's not a cruise ship, it's actually getting people off the bus, the small buses, and then getting them on down onto the Drummond or the other wharf.
yeah,
And then they don't have to walk. I get that, but then what happens to those buses? I think? So,
so, those buses shouldn't be coming in until they're actually ready to pick up and drop off people, so that would need to be managed closely, but
Yeah.
there is also, we haven't formalised the plans yet, but there's some space near Drummond's where there could be a short-term pick-up, drop-off point.
so, yeah, okay, I know that space you're talking about is a car parking spot there, illegal parking.
Yeah, so
Alright.
we won't pretend that it will be pretty or easy.
No, I was hoping that might stay have a little bit less. Yeah,
So you suggesting, Nigel, that it's a bit of.
we'll just cut that back a little bit. But maybe if you cut that back, that's a few more metres, so you can drop off without impeding it.
Then,
Yeah, up in there somehow, up. Get it further over, I mean, I guess, Acro Dolphins don't need that little building, because they've got a lease on that. And then there's the other aspect of Bruce, I'm trying to understand how that would work with the traffic coming over that bridge all the time, and
Yes,
there's quite a bit of movement in there.
so that would just be the sort of the short-term storage of equipment that they need
Okay,
to have. Because that abutment area is so small, just
Right.
trying to find some other areas of relatively flat land.
Okay,
That could be used, but in the areas like a wharf, so there's not too much travel time between the two.
yeah, I understand.
Yeah,
I can see that be one of the areas that people will want to talk about
yeah,
when you go out, you know.
Yeah.
So I can see questions around that. I think that Bruce Slipway thing, because there's a lot of traffic, people going around to the Glen, you know, people live around there,
yeah.
hundreds of people.
So that would just be sort of the part off the
I
road.
know the big park, yeah.
Yeah,
It's where the old Slipway is.
yes, which fortunately doesn't get used too much, so the yacht club have confirmed they're okay for us to
That's good.
use that area, and the intention will be, after we've talked to the community board about it, to put some signage up in the area sooner rather than later, just to notify that these areas will be used as part of the Acro Walk rebuild, so that
Yeah.
people are lots of notice for these things.
Yeah.
So we did want to ask the community board, these areas that we're showing, are you comfortable with these? Won't go as far as to say can get support for it, but
Well, luckily I got to see that early, because I was a bit concerned about all the other users who mentioned them. being on the French committee, president of the French Festival Society, Heritage Festival Society, we hadn't been notified, and I think the way you've described it is still usable
Absolutely.
when those events happen, and with the dragon boating and the harvest swim and the race and many those things. I think this bit down here is probably the most questionable bit around the abutment area. If that could be reduced a bit more to cover drop-offs. There's actually quite a few buses coming over here.
Yeah.
The whole demographics change, you know, we used to get the big buses. Now we're getting a lot of Chinese and small buses. And they go down the wharf, and a lot of it's 52s, particularly, but there's lots. I mean, Chinese New Year, I think 52s did about 4 or 5 trips down the harbour. They were full, and each one of those little buses. Yeah, so there's a lot of movement in that area.
Do they spend money here?
Limited focus money.
But if they're not using
Don't
the
stay
wharf
here.
there, will they want to
Thanks.
stop there?
Yeah.
My question is, if they're not using that wharf,
They won't stop
then
it.
will they stop there? Or will they?
Well, there has to be a provision made further now, not it.
That's the thing.
Eh?
I mean,
No, that's a different topic, there's a difference. Carry on.
what I'm saying is, there's no benefit to the community. I don't know why we.
Well, we're worried about them. Well, you tell Pip, I know.
Well, I don't know. I mean, that's why I'm asking the question.
No, well, there is a benefit to the community.
Okay.
But it's just very refined benefits. They're not staying here.
What we've seen from here previously is that we can have enough time. They will work pretty hard to make things work. So if there was a period where we knew there was something going on, we could say, look, you know, for the sake of trip drop off and pick up, can be push the fence back a bit, or can we have a brief pause or whatever. So
So is there information on, so signs that you have out, is there a contact point if there's issues that people can contact, or is that more of a just talk onto the side? I don't know how much you want to put your phone number.
I am totally fine to put my phone number, my email address out there.
Really?
We've also got the Akaroa Wharf email address, which is also monitored from our comms team as well.
Yeah. So
Um,
instead of us sort of like anticipating what the issues are, I just say if there is,
Yeah.
like I just love by you making yourself available to be contacted.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, in the original, I've been on this for about 6 years. Our original discussion about reusing Drummond's Wharf was that people were going to, buses if they were coming over would be dropping off here and they would walk down to. And that there was, you know, that area, particularly over through January, February, up to March, it's super congested. Even now, it's full.
Yeah.
Even on weekdays, on rainy days over here, that's really quite full. If people go drop in there, they get an easy park, they go and have some fish and chips, and there's a lot of action there. There's a lot of action here. Yeah. That area down the wreck is quite open and flexible. But there's a bit of a pinch point there that I would think that's where you'll get your reaction.
Yeah.
I can see what you're doing. I understand it because I've been hooked into this for so bloody long. I mean, yeah. Look, you're doing well. You're doing well. I don't want to see the wharf held up any more than it is. I think we've spoken enough about it. I think we're going to move on. I think you might get a bit of reaction around the design on the wharf, particularly around the Great Rocker thing. I mean, it's very much a colonial area, and I'm not being negative in any way to Vivian. I'd love to be friends. I mean, in the root of it. But I think there might be some discussion, and I don't know if that's open for discussion or not, but as this goes to resource consent, I think there may be some discussion around it. The fact that it was a very proud British place, because I think it's really involved with the initiative down on the road town. Anyway, I just thought I'd get that out there.
Thank you.
That's good. Byron.
Thank you.
No, good.
So budget wise, so when you kind of alluded to it, but like we've still got the budget in place to carry out all these plans.
Yes, at the moment, we were previously tracking to about 3.7 million overspent. As in the plans that Belgium was over our budget, so we were needing to bring it down. We've managed to pull it down to just over 120,000 overspent. So we're still looking for opportunities to bring it further down.
Has that involved a reduction in scope or not?
No,
No.
it hasn't. It's
Right.
revolved around looking at our construction methodology, the equipment being used for it and how we can do it smarter. So that's why we changed our procurement approach. So we bought a contract in earlier to say, this is what we're planning, but how can we do it better? So they've said, do boom, boom, boom. And it's just about the order of things, the equipment used, and marine infrastructure is bloody expensive, so you make a few tweaks and it's.
James done a job, to be honest.
Sounds
Okay,
well done.
that's good. So scope reduction's not,
We haven't needed to do
No.
that.
You want to?
we'll leave it there.
I've got one more slide in there, I think. So this is the community information sharing. So something we were really keen to get some feedback and guidance on is how are we best to go about sharing information with the community? We've contemplated doing like a town hall event at the Gaiety, but then sometimes that is really poor attendance. And
It
we
does,
think,
yeah.
what's a better way to do it? So as the people that know the community best, if you've got any ideas or suggestions for things to do or not to do, we would be really.
Honestly, don't know how you get those people out, get off their bums and get out. I mean, I think you promoted, we had a well promoted consultation process, or the process might have been debated about, but it was well advertised and there was only about 16 of people turned up. And that was a big turnout. It was done over 2 time frames, possibly should have had a weekend one as well. Would they got a lot more out? People come over for the weekends, the match owners. 80% of the properties here are owned by people that don't live here.
So what works?
So, I don't know.
A little drop better? Or
Possibly a little bit.
Or
I don't know.
door?
So I mean, this is a community that can get 200 people turn out to a hall on a Saturday afternoon to talk about sewerage,
Yeah,
right? So if it matters,
yeah, I think
the engagement will happen.
Yeah.
If you provide the opportunity. So on some level, it doesn't like if you create the opportunity, people will turn out in numbers if they feel they need to.
I think if you're going to go and have that consultation, you've got to let the questions flow and not be directed.
Yeah.
No, I think that's become quite.
So we have done drop-ins before.
Hmm?
We have done drop-in sessions before.
Yeah, you have, yeah. Don't get a lot of people though, do you?
No, but I mean, James is pretty flexible, we can schedule those for, evenings and also on a weekend, it's not a
Yeah,
problem.
yeah, down the bowling club, it's done those. I
But,
mean, we're doing wolf ones down
yeah,
there.
we haven't stuck to that under,
Yeah, I mean, I'm just wondering if a formal presentation is because you create the thing, it's an event at the Gaiety. It's going to be speakers.
Yeah, and
It's gonna be an hour.
it's conversation.
People come.
Well, you guys are
And if
stimulating
they don't,
conversation.
then they're obviously okay with where things are at.
Well, yeah,
That's how I would.
yeah, we've got
from
to accept that's the
experience.
case.
Any of the above, because drop-in sessions are more personable too, I think. But you might have to do more of them to get more people. Yeah. All of the above.
The setbacks meeting does tend to
it's not really consultation.
No, it's an update.
Yeah.
It's information.
So are you trying to then say, okay, because it doesn't have to come down to a resource consent, or is this going to impact?
Oh,
This
it
is-
definitely does.
It does.
Okay, so that's where people can have the opportunity.
Well, like
to
say
speak
5
into it, isn't it?
That's their formal opportunity.
Yeah.
If it's open notified, right? Like it,
Yeah.
that would be.
But then that in itself is essentially, here's 500 pages of highly technical reports.
Yes.
It's not a very
Yeah.
nice way to provide people with information, digestible information.
It
So,
said, like, if it really matters, history has shown that people in the community will
yeah,
address that.
Yeah.
Even if it's super technical.
yeah.
So when was the last time the community, broadly speaking, was briefed about the wharf and where it's at? I know you've been engaging with different groups of holders, but as a whole community, when was the last time
We
we
send out newsletters roughly every 3 months. So we're sending that to everybody who's subscribed to the list and keep them website. There's about 140. So there's a few, but I also suspect there's probably a few people who don't even know that exists.
Yes.
As far as I think the last sort of actual meet in person community event other than some specific ones with the Fishermen's Association, that would have been some years ago, prior to my time.
Well, so you've got 150 odd people, people interested in the wharf on a list.
Yes.
It would take not much to do a wee online survey of those 150 people.
Yeah.
Because they're obviously the most engaged.
Yeah.
Or have been over the process. Ask them if they would prefer just a drop-in thing or a formal session.
Yeah.
Would it be better on a weekday night or a weekend? But like just to maybe do a little, I don't know, like it's not much, is it, to do an online podcast? Yeah. Because if those 150 who are already really interested in it kind of go, oh, we really like this or this and this or something, then we can expand on that and try and get more people, into whatever comes out of that. But it is an interesting community to engage with, and it really, it depends on the topic and,
Okay, cool. And the last slide was just saying, are there any questions? There's no further information to share.
Question. So this is a question kind of which I could have asked, but I didn't want to butt in earlier. Just about the privately owned buildings. So because you did say that they were going to be doing their own, they have to do a building assessment to see where their buildings are up to, and there's some time frame on that. But so if it showed that their buildings are way below whatever required, and they didn't want to pay the money to maintain them and keep them there, then none of this, as the question is, would these extra expenses that the council has to is looking at, would that still, and that work, would that still happen, or what would?
It would depend on quite a few things. So if one of the building owners didn't want to,
How many building owners are there?
just check. If either of them decided they didn't want to continue to occupy that space, we'd have to have some good chats around what we do for that. We could potentially demolish when we're demolishing the wharf. However, we don't get the sense from either of the building owners that their buildings are in that bad condition or that they're that unwilling to spend some money on the buildings. I think if their reports came back saying that the buildings were in poor condition, that would just fast track them to do some work to the building.
Strong. Both building owners have said they wish to stay and wish to improve their buildings.
Come up to the same.
My other question related to the buildings is, so there's all this wonderful work going on with the design, but what about what those buildings are quite dominant
They have character.
visual nature of the wharf, and so what steps are being taken or might be taken to take into account or influence how those buildings look, like the wharf and what's going on there? What is there anything that you can do?
They're privately owned, so
they could say blue like that.
It's tricky really, because we were granting them at least to occupy our space, obviously, some design guidelines and stuff, which is where we would hope we would maybe be able to get to, but that looks like it's just been particularly expensive, won't happen. So they will be effectively getting a occupational lease of ECAM, not council, to occupy the area. So it is tricky, but it won't be much, but I think that they will be hopefully connected enough to the community to
and see the advantages of the theme and the vibe and the beautification of everything.
What we really must do is we've got to draw a line, make a line in the sand to this, this umbilical cord thing that we've got going on is really challenging. So that will cease. So that in the future they are totally independent. There will be some services like a footpath that they can connect to. That'll be the limit of it. So
Can I just coming back to the fact that they're not going to lift the buildings in this sea level rise thing? I'm still a bit obsessed with this. But surely if they're going to make a plan to upgrade and bring that up and get another 50 years life out of that building, They're gonna have to bring up the height of that building as well.
I think both they're interested in raising their building, so
That's-
talking to
yeah.
their engineers about what that would look like.
And we haven't, we've actually got as far as reaching out to say, if you want to use the opportunity, like a demo of contractors on site,
Yeah, use them.
by all means, we will make that as easy as we can.
Okay,
There is some interest in that.
thank you.
And likewise, if they were to do a significant amount of work to their buildings, they'd also need to go through that resource consent process, which also
Oh,
has
no.
some quite strict rules around the landscape visual assessment. So I think the likelihood of them suddenly adding an extra story and painting it right back in their resource consent process would certainly prevent that sort of thing from happening in an uncontrolled way.
Thank you so much. I mean, what you've presented and makes total sense and very reasonable and like you've got it all well in hand. And just the way that you're working with the community is to be afforded as well as the budget.
Thank you.
Can I just say, particularly to Paul, I really respect and everyone loves your input and the way you go about your business. And this has been an example. These are long projects and are really up and making strongest of characters. Well done being there.
Oh, we really want.
Still in the same shoes we were 20 years ago.
Yeah.
All right.
How do you go with wastewater treatment plants? So is that
No, we really want this to be something that the community is proud of. And it is a bit of a challenge because, it's much the old structure is, it just gets too complicated, but I suppose the nice thing is this can create its own legacy going forward maybe. I quite enjoy the ability to get some cultural narrative in there as one of the few places that Anuku can celebrate their connection to the harbour, Pātaka, which is very different. And right next to it, of course, here we've got Britomart Reserve, which is in its own right, I think, needs to be a bit of a shush up to.
The cannon's moving forward now, last.
Yeah, so there's two stories to be told.
There is two stories, thank you.
Yeah.
And before we let you go, just quickly, will there be a decommissioning ceremony because to finish well, I guess, and to appreciate what it has been, is there something like that?
Yes, we will certainly, that sort of so far down the track, we haven't got into details, but we certainly,
Yeah, no, fair enough.
but so without doing anything to respect its past.
Okay, so thank you.
wonderful?
Guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Righty. So let's finish round up the meeting with the Pātaka. Thanks, everybody.